Trend lines and the angle of attack. At the end of this video, you're going to understand why the angle of attack is the most important part of a trend line. So when we look at a trend line, first we have to draw each trend line, and we can see there was a shift in this market from downtrend to an uptrend. And there was a few things that happened in between that. So first, let's start looking at the downtrend of this market. Originally, we had a very low sloping downtrend. We can see it was touched 1, 2, 3 at 3 different points, which again is an incredibly important part of a trend line. So it's touched once, twice, 3 times, and then the next retests of that area were quite a ways away. And as always, we're going to be ignoring points such as these kind of freak points when we're dealing with trend lines, because even though the market may push quickly up in one area, generally we're not going to be considering these tails or wicks on the candlesticks because we're looking for a general trend in the market. Remember, trend lines aren't something that's hard set like support and resistance areas. This is just an expected move. And what we see next is we get a increased angle of attack for this trend line. So we would redraw it when we start seeing this market consistently hitting lower highs. So we're increasing the angle of attack on this trend line. So we can see we get this initial point here. We get another, this is a rough test because we're not going to consider that so much because like I said, these are just, we're looking at a daily chart here and these are intraday, like just the wicks on the candlesticks. We generally want to draw through the meat of the trade. So this is our first point of real contact here. And then we get another close retest. And like we said, we're not going to be paying attention to these extreme wicks. And then the angle of attack is even greater. And you can see this market starts to accelerate down at this point. So both of these original 1 and 2 angles of attack for this downtrend are no longer quite valid. So we need to redraw it again. So we take our trend line when this happens and we draw it down here. So you see this increasing aggressive attack angle with these trend lines. And the more aggressive your attack angle is for a trend line, the less likely it is to be able to sustain that level. The market can't just rocket down. So once this market has reached this level of almost unsustainable angle for the trend line, what we see is we see the reversal on this trend line. So the main points of the actual reversal are going to be, we look back at the previous high, we look for a retest of that high, so the retest is made, and then we look for a break of that high, and then even further breaks of all levels. So we really want to look at this area right here. So we see that on this one day, the wick is quite high, so its high is set. But we're really paying attention to the meat of the trade here. We're paying attention not to the wicks here as much and more to the actual closes or where the majority of trading volume actually happened. The market might have pushed up in this particular day right here, but it's not of a particular concern for us because we want to be focusing more on the meat of the trade for trend lines. So when we get the first test and then the breaking of these levels, and on top of that, we start getting higher lows following here. That's when we can redraw our trend line to now be going from a downtrend line to a uptrend line. Let's clean this up a little bit. So now we can redraw our trend line. Start here in the meat of the trade and then go to our first point. So what we see is a very low angle of attack trend line in the upwards direction, and we get our first retest of that level right here. So we're drawing it between this point, and our first retest is right here. From there, the angle of attack increases, and we can redraw our trend line again. So draw from the meat to this point, and we see is an incredibly powerful trend line. Its angle of attack isn't overly aggressive on top of the fact that it is retested time and time again. So it's retested here, market gets close but doesn't fully retest, and it's just been recently retested right here with the wick alone, without even the meat of the trade. So it's proving to be a quite good expected move. And as we talked about before, trend lines aren't support and resistance levels, they're expected moves in the market. So it's best to give your trend lines a little bit of breathing room. We don't expect direct bounces always off of these levels, but they give us a really good guideline for the areas to watch out for. So getting back to the angle of attack for these trend lines, let's redraw these for the previous down trend line. So what we see here are two different sets of trend lines. The original ones for the downward momentum market and now the ones for the upward momentum market. When we have these down trend lines, the angle of attack is incredibly important because a sharp downward move is generally going to be unsustainable in the market. We have to pay attention for when a market starts running in one direction for the possible reversal like we saw here. Often when you get extremely aggressive angles of attack for trend lines in either the up or down direction, you'll see a market reversal, often quite sharp, and correction after this happens. Another thing that validates each of these trend lines is the number of times the market touches or approaches each of these trend lines. So we see on the most recent one where we have the initial point and then the first point that actually makes the trend line here. So between these 2 points is where we form this uptrend line. When we get the successive retests of this trend line, all that does is reinforce the bulls' position in the market, stating the fact that their initial assumption that the market is trending upwards and their expected move has been time and time again proven to be correct. So if we start to see this angle of attack on this trend line increase even sharper, we may want to tighten our stops up on this market or be paying even more attention for an aggressive turnaround in the market. As you can see in the previous section, when the angle became too aggressive, the down momentum became almost unsustainable, and the bulls eventually were able to regain control of the market.
Do you have any trading topics that you'd like covered? Leave a comment below and we can dive deeper into all things trading. If you just enjoyed the video, please subscribe or leave a like.